What would you do if everything you knew about strength was wrong? The Mojave sun beats down on forward operating base Sentinel like a brass hammer on steel. Heat shimmers rise from the desert floor, distorting the horizon where ancient rock formations stand like broken teeth against the sky. Colonel Wallace Beauregard stares through his office window at the tactical problem that has haunted him for 3 weeks. 2 miles east, perched on a granite outcrop, sits the abandoned mining complex they've codenamed Iron Fist. Soviet-era concrete, reinforced bunkers, a maze of tunnels that intelligence suggests house enemy supply caches. The fortress must fall, but every demolition expert they've consulted shakes their head. Too complex, too many variables. The rock formation beneath could collapse unpredictably. One wrong calculation, and the entire mountain becomes an avalanche that buries half the valley. Beauregard's fingers drum against his desk. 3 specialists flown in from Fort Bragg, 2 more from the Navy's underwater demolition teams. Each one studies the satellite photos, runs calculations, then delivers the same verdict. Impossible. In the motor pool, Staff Sergeant Opal Clementine wipes grease from her hands and watches the latest expert pack his gear. Another failure. Another man who talks big until he sees the real challenge. Clementine has been fixing engines at Sentinel for 8 months. Quiet work. Predictable problems with logical solutions. She keeps her head down, does her job, stays invisible. The other mechanics respect her. Not because she talks much, she doesn't. But because when Private Orville Paxton's transport broke down during a sandstorm 40 miles out, Clementine worked through the night to jury-rig a radio beacon that guided the rescue team home. Never asked for credit. Never mentioned it again. Now she overhears the specialists talking as they load their equipment. The fortress is a death trap. The angles are wrong. The rock composition, too, unstable. They need someone who understands both geology and explosives at a level that exists only in textbooks. Someone who doesn't exist. Clementine says nothing, returns to her work. But her eyes drift toward the eastern ridge where Iron Fist waits like a challenge carved in stone. That evening, in the mess hall, conversations circle around the same topic. The mission that can't be completed. The fortress that can't be touched. Lieutenant Zebulon Marsh, fresh from the academy, pounds his fist on the table. We should just hit it with everything we've got. Artillery, airstrikes. Overwhelm it with firepower. The veterans shake their heads. Intel says there are civilians in the valley. Below, shepherds, nomadic families. A bombardment would kill innocents and create an international incident. Captain August Rowe, the base's intelligence officer, speaks quietly. We need precision. Surgical strikes. The kind of controlled demolition that brings down exactly what you want while leaving everything else untouched. Like building demolition in reverse, someone suggests. Exactly, Rowe nods. But who has that kind of expertise out here? The question hangs in the air like smoke. Crowley finishes his meal in silence. Outside, the desert wind carries the scent of sage and distant rain. He walks to his quarters, past the communications array where Private Hazel Irene monitors radio chatter from across the region, as she's been eavesdropping on enemy frequencies for weeks, piecing together fragments of conversation, building a picture of the supply network that runs through Iron Fist. Hazel knows things, sees patterns others miss. But she's just a radio operator. Her opinions don't matter in briefing rooms where colonels make decisions. In his bunk, Crowley opens a worn leather journal. The pages are filled with sketches, not engines or mechanical, diagrams, geological formations, rock strata, stress patterns in stone. He's been mapping the ridge for months. Every morning run takes him closer to the base of the formation. Every evening, he adds new details to his drawings. The fortress isn't impossible. It's just misunderstood. The next morning brings news that changes everything. Intelligence reports. Enemy movement toward Iron Fist. Whatever supplies are hidden in those tunnels, they're about to be moved. The window for action is closing. Beauregard calls an emergency briefing. Every officer on base crowds into the command center. The satellite feeds show trucks moving across the desert. A convoy heading straight for the fortress. We have 72 hours, the colonel announces. Maybe less. His gaze sweeps the room, looking for answers, finding only worried faces. The demolition problem remains unsolved. The fortress still stands. And somewhere in the surrounding mountains, an enemy force prepares to retrieve weapons that could change the balance of power in the entire region. Time is running out. But in the back of the room, a quiet mechanic closes her eyes and sees something others have missed. Not the fortress as an obstacle that as an opportunity. The search for a demolition expert has consumed 3 weeks and yielded nothing. But perhaps they've been looking in the wrong places. Perhaps the answer has been here all along. Dawn breaks over. The desert like molten copper poured across sand. The enemy convoy is 12 hours closer. Satellite imagery shows dust clouds moving through mountain passes, heading toward Iron Fist with military precision. In the communications bunker, private. Hazel Irene intercepts fragments of radio chatter. Coordinates. Time signatures. The pieces of a puzzle that reveal the convoy's true purpose. They're not just retrieving supplies. They're evacuating something critical. Something that requires specialized transport vehicles and armed escort. Hazel transcribes the intercepts. With steady hands, her superiors will analyze the intelligence later, but she already sees the pattern. The enemy knows the fortress is vulnerable. They're racing to extract their assets before American forces find a solution. But what if the solution is already here? In the motor pool, Clementine performs her morning maintenance routine, checking fluid levels, testing battery voltage. Her hands work automatically while her mind calculates angles and pressure points. The fortress sits at the intersection of 3 geological fault lines. Not a weakness, a strength. The miners who built it understood something modern warfare has forgotten: how to work with stone instead of against it. The demolition experts saw only obstacles. Clementine sees leverage points, places where a single precise charge could redirect the mountain's own weight, turn the fortress's greatest strength into its fatal flaw. But she's just a mechanic. Who would listen to a staff sergeant with grease under her fingernails? The question haunts her as she watches another truck convoy prepare to leave base. More specialists called in. More experts who will study the problem and declare it unsolvable. Time ticks away like water in the desert. And somewhere in the mountains, enemy forces move closer to their prize. The briefing room fills with tension thick as desert dust. Colonel Beauregard stands before a wall-mounted display showing Iron Fist from every angle. Satellite photos, topographical maps, thermal imaging that reveals the fortress's internal structure like an X-ray of broken bones. 48 hours remain. Captain August Rowe delivers the intelligence update with clip precision. The enemy convoy consists of 12 vehicles. Heavy transport trucks capable of carrying artillery pieces or chemical weapons. Their estimated arrival at Iron Fist is tomorrow at dawn. That we cannot allow them to reach those supplies, Beauregard states. The room falls silent. Everyone knows the unspoken truth. Without a demolition solution, they'll have to attempt a direct assault on a fortress designed to withstand exactly that kind of attack. American casualties will be catastrophic. Lieutenant Zebulon Marsh raises his hand. Sir, what if we evacuate the civilian population and use bunker busters? Level the entire ridge? The colonel's jaw tightens. Negative. Political ramifications aside, destroying the mountain would contaminate the water table for 3 surrounding villages. We need surgical precision, not a sledgehammer. The officers exchange glances. Surgical precision from weapons designed for mass destruction. It's like asking a hurricane to thread a needle. In the back row, near the exit, Staff Sergeant Opal Clementine sits motionless. Her weathered hands rest on her knees. Her gray eyes study the topographical display with the intensity of a woman reading her own obituary. The limestone foundation curves beneath the fortress like a natural arch. The Soviets built their bunkers directly into the rock face, using the mountain's own strength as reinforcement. What the demolition experts saw as an impregnable defense, Crowley recognizes as elegant engineering. But elegant engineering always contains its own weakness. The briefing continues. Contingency plans, casualty estimates, the grim mathematics of warfare when diplomacy fails and time runs out. Major Virginia Hope, the base's medical officer, speaks about triage protocols, how to handle mass casualties in a forward operating base with limited resources. Her voice remains steady, professional, but her hands shake slightly as she reviews the projections. 200 wounded. Minimum. The number hangs in the air like a death sentence. Beauregard dismisses the meeting with orders to prepare for assault. The officers file out, their conversations hushed and urgent. Plans within plans. Backup strategies for when the primary strategy fails. Clementine remains seated until the room empties. Then she approaches the display, studying the fortress from an angle the experts missed. The mountain isn't solid. It's layered. Sedimentary rock compressed over millennia into a formation that appears monolithic but contains natural fracture. Lines. Seams where different stone types meet. Stress points where the Earth's own movement has created invisible fault lines that a quiet voice speaks behind him. See something they don't. Clementine turns. Captain Rowe stands in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Not my place to say, sir. Rowe steps closer, his boots silent on the concrete floor. Intelligence work teaches you to notice things others miss. Details that don't fit the pattern. Like a motor pool sergeant who shows up to every tactical briefing but never speaks. The two face each other across the empty briefing room. Outside, the desert wind rattles the windows with increasing intensity. You study geology, Rowe states. It's not a question. Clementine hesitates, then nods. Before the Army. Colorado School of Mines. Structural engineering with a focus on rock mechanics. But you're listed as a mechanic. Family needed the money. Couldn't afford to finish the degree. Enlisted instead. Rowe processes this information with the methodical precision of an intelligence analyst. The pieces clicking into place like components in a complex machine. What do you see up there that our experts missed? Clementine returns her attention to the display. Her finger traces the contour lines that map the fortress's foundation there. Thinking like demolition experts. How to destroy something built to last. But the mountain wasn't built. It was shaped by forces they don't understand. Go on. The limestone formation follows a predictable pattern. Horizontal layers compressed by vertical pressure. The Soviets built their bunkers to distribute weight across the strongest points. But they missed something. What? The natural arch underneath. It's not solid rock. It's a bridge. And every bridge has a keystone. Rowe's eyes narrow. You're talking about bringing down the entire mountain. Not the entire mountain. Just the part that matters. The fortress sits on a natural stone bridge spanning a deep canyon. The bridge appears solid from above, but the limestone has been carved by underground water flow for thousands of years. The support structure is more delicate than it appears. One precisely placed charge at the keystone point would collapse the bridge. The fortress would fall into the canyon below. A controlled demolition that uses the mountain's own weight as the demolition tool. Surgical precision. But the risk is enormous. A miscalculation could trigger a larger collapse. The kind of geological catastrophe that reshapes the landscape and buries everything for miles. Rowe studies the display with new understanding. The fortress isn't just a military target. It's a geological puzzle that requires someone who understands both warfare and the language of stone, someone like Crowley. How long would you need to calculate the precise placement? Clementine considers. 6 hours. Maybe 8. I need to study the rock samples from the geological survey, run stress calculations, map the underground water channels that we don't have rock samples. Then I need to get close enough to examine the formation directly. The words hang between them like a challenge. Getting close means crossing 2 miles of open desert, climbing the ridge under enemy observation, taking core samples from rock that might be booby-trapped. A suicide mission disguised as geological research. But if you're right, Rowe says slowly, it could work. If I'm wrong, it could kill everyone in the valley. The two stand in silence, weighing possibilities against consequences. Outside, the desert prepares for another brutal day. And somewhere in the mountains, an enemy convoy moves closer to its destination. Time is running out. But perhaps they've been asking the wrong question. Not how to destroy the fortress. How to let the mountain destroy itself. 24 hours remain. Captain Rowe presents Clementine's theory to Colonel Beauregard in the privacy of the command bunker. The geological survey maps spread across the table like prophecies written in contour lines and elevation markers. Beauregard listens without interruption. His weathered face reveals nothing as Rowe explains the Keystone Bridge theory, the natural arch, the underground water channels, the possibility of surgical precision where brute force has failed. When row finishes, silence fills the bunker like smoke that you're asking me to bet 200 American lives on the geological theories of a motor pool sergeant, Beauregard says. Finally, that I'm asking you to consider an alternative to a frontal assault that we both know will fail. The colonel studies the maps with the intensity of a man reading his own court-martial papers. The fortress glares back from the photographs, impregnable and defiant. What does Clementine need? Close reconnaissance. Rock samples. 12 hours to run calculations. And if he's wrong? Then we proceed with the assault as planned. Beauregard weighs the options. A desperate gamble against a certain disaster. The kind of decision that ends careers or saves them. Do it. That night, under a moonless sky, Clementine prepares for the most dangerous geological survey in military history. She trades her mechanic's coveralls for desert camouflage, replaces her tool belt with climbing gear and sample containers. Private Hazel Irene monitors enemy radio traffic from the communications bunker. Her headphones crackle with intercepted transmissions, patrol schedules, guard rotations, the electronic heartbeat of a fortress preparing for siege. She plots the information on a tactical display, identifying gaps in the enemy's surveillance pattern. Windows of opportunity measured in minutes. The convoy has stopped for the night 30 miles out. They'll resume movement at dawn. Clementine studies her intelligence briefing with the focus of a woman whose calculations must be perfect. One mistake in timing or positioning will expose her to enemy fire. A second mistake will invalidate all her geological theories. There's a blind spot on the eastern approach, Hazel explains. The ridge formation blocks their observation post for approximately 15 minutes every hour when the patrol shifts positions. 15 minutes to climb 200 feet of vertical rock face. Collect samples from 3 different geological layers. Photograph the stress patterns in the limestone foundation. 15 minutes to prove or disprove a theory that could save or damn them all. Lieutenant Zebulon Marsh volunteers to provide sniper cover from a concealed position 800 yards out. His rifle scope can reach the fortress approach, but not the climbing route itself. Once you start up that rock face, you're on your own, he warns. Clementine nods. She's been on her own for most of her adult life. Tonight won't be different. The infiltration begins at 0200 hours. Clementine moves through the desert like a ghost, her footsteps silent on the hard pan. The fortress looms above her, a black silhouette against the stars. She reaches the base of the ridge as the enemy patrol completes its rotation. 15 minutes of opportunity stretching ahead like a tightrope over an abyss. The climb is brutal. Limestone crumbles under her fingers. Her sample containers rattle against the rock face with each movement. But her geological training guides her to the critical points. Here, the junction between the sedimentary layers. The stress fracture that runs horizontal through the foundation. The point where water erosion has weakened the stone's crystalline structure. She extracts core samples with a diamond-tipped drill no larger than a pencil. Each sample tells a story written in compressed minerals and fossilized time. The limestone is older than expected. Softer, more porous. 8 minutes remaining. Higher up the ridge, she finds what she's looking for. The keystone point. The structural linchpin that holds the natural arch together. A section of rock no larger than a coffin, but critical as a heart valve. She photographs the formation from multiple angles. Measures the stress patterns with instruments borrowed from the base geology lab. Maps the underground water channels by listening to the way sound echoes through the stone. The math is beautiful in its simplicity. One charge, precisely calculated, placed at the exact point where the arch transfers its weight to the canyon walls below. 3 minutes remaining. Clementine begins her descent, moving faster now. The samples secure in her pack. The photographs stored in waterproof containers. The calculations already forming in her mind. Below, the patrol returns to position. Flashlight beams sweep across the ridge face, probing for intruders. But Clementine has melted back into the desert, invisible as wind. The return journey passes in a blur of careful movement and controlled breathing. Each step measured, each shadow utilized. The fortress watches from above like a stone god, unaware that its secret has been discovered. Dawn breaks as Clementine reaches the perimeter of forward operating base Sentinel. The desert blooms with harsh light and brutal heat. In the distance, Dust clouds mark the enemy convoys resumed movement. 12 hours until they reach Iron Fist. 12 hours to prove that sometimes the quietest voice carries the most dangerous truth. That I in the geology lab. Clementine spreads her samples across the examination table. Each core sample is labeled with precise coordinates and depth measurements. The photographs arranged in sequence to show the fortress's hidden structure. Captain Rowe arrives with coffee and anticipation. The base's survival depends on what these rock fragments reveal. Clementine studies the limestone under magnification, the mineral composition, the stress patterns, the way water has carved invisible channels through stone that appears solid. Her calculations fill 3 pages of precise mathematical notation. Load-bearing capacity, compression ratios, the exact point where geological forces intersect with human engineering. The Keystone Bridge theory isn't just possible. It's inevitable. 1 charge. 40 pounds of C for explosive, placed at coordinates that exist only in Clementine's mind and the ancient mathematics of stone. The fortress can fall, will fall, must fall, but only if they trust a mechanic who sees mountains as machines and stone as a language written in pressure and time. The decision rests with Colonel Beauregard. And somewhere in the desert, an enemy convoy rolls closer to its destination, unaware that their impregnable fortress has become a geological time bomb, waiting for the right hand to light the fuse. 6 hours remain. The enemy convoy crests the final ridge, dust plumes marking their approach like smoke signals against the morning sky. 12 vehicles loaded with specialists and equipment, racing to evacuate supplies that could shift the balance of regional power. They believe Iron Fist is impregnable. They're about to discover that mountains, like men, can fall when their foundations fail. In the command bunker, Colonel Beauregard stares at Crowley's calculations. 3 pages of mathematical precision that reduce geological forces to numbers. Load vectors, compression ratios, the exact coordinates where 40 pounds of explosives could accomplish what artillery batteries cannot. The theory is sound, Captain Rowe reports. The rock samples confirm everything. The Keystone Point exists exactly where Clementine predicted. Beauregard's weathered hands traced the topographical maps. Years of military experience war against the desperate hope of an untested solution. If he's wrong, then we lose nothing we haven't already lost. The assault proceeds as planned. If he's right, then a motor pool sergeant saves 200 American lives. The decision weighs on Beauregard like the desert heat. Command responsibility, the burden of choosing between certain disaster and calculated risk. He looks up from the maps, his gray eyes reflecting the weight of command. Get her the explosives. The final phase begins with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. Clementine trades her geological instruments for demolition equipment. 40 pounds of C for plastic explosive. Detonation. Cord. Remote triggers calibrated to her exact specifications. Private Hazel Irene monitors enemy communications, tracking the convoy's progress through mountain passes. Her intercepted transmissions reveal their timeline. 4 hours to reach Iron Fist. 2 hours to load the critical supplies. Dawn departure with enough firepower to devastate Allied positions across the region. Unless the fortress falls first, Lieutenant Zebulon Marsh assembles a diversionary force on the western approach. Enough noise and movement to draw enemy attention. While Crowley approaches from the blind spot Hazel identified, the plan is elegant in its simplicity. While the enemy prepares for conventional assault, one woman with precise knowledge will climb their impregnable mountain and place a single charge at the point where geology becomes destiny. But first, Clementine must reach the Keystone. The approach begins at 1,400 hours. Clementine moves through the desert with the explosive charge secured in a specialized pack. Each step calculated, each breath measured. The fortress looms above her, its concrete walls gleaming in the afternoon sun. Enemy patrols sweep the ridgeline. With increasing frequency, the convoy's arrival has heightened their vigilance. Searchlights probe the shadows. Radio chatter crackles with nervous energy. They know something is coming. They don't know what. Clementine reaches the base of the ridge as Marsh's diversionary force opens fire from the western approach. Muzzle flashes strobe across the desert. Mortar rounds explode against the fortress walls in a display of futile aggression. The enemy responds predictably. Defensive positions swing, toward the visible threat. Patrols abandon their eastern routes to reinforce the western perimeter. The Keystone Point lies exposed. Clementine begins her final climb. The explosive charge adds 30 pounds to her load, but her movements remain fluid. Practiced. She knows this route now. Every handhold, every stress point in the limestone face. The fortress towers above her, its bulk silhouetted against the setting sun. Inside those concrete walls, enemy soldiers prepare for a siege that will never come. Because the mountain itself has chosen sides, the Keystone Point appears exactly as her calculations predicted. A section of limestone no larger than a desk, but critical as a heart valve. The structural linchpin that holds the natural arch together. Clementine places the charge with surgical precision. The C4 molds against the rock face like clay. Detonation cord snakes through carefully drilled holes. Remote triggers calibrated to her exact specifications, 40 pounds of explosive. Positioned at the intersection of geological forces that have shaped this landscape for millennia. 1 charge. 1 mountain. 1 chance to prove that understanding trumps firepower. The descent requires different skills. Speed over stealth. The diversionary attack can't last forever. Soon the enemy will realize their true vulnerability lies not in frontal assault, but in the quiet expertise of a woman who reads stone like sheet music. Clementine reaches the desert floor as the first enemy. Patrol begins sweeping eastward. Her timing is measured in heartbeats. Each second brings discovery closer, but she's already beyond their reach. The charge is set. The mathematics are perfect. The mountain waits for her command. Back at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, the command staff watches satellite feeds of the convoy's final approach. 12 vehicles winding through the canyon toward Iron Fist. Their arrival will trigger the evacuation that robs American forces of critical intelligence. Unless the fortress falls first, Clementine's voice crackles through the radio. Charges. Set. Awaiting your command. Beauregard stares at the screens showing enemy movement. The convoy will reach Iron Fist in 30 minutes. The point of no return approaches like a desert storm that he keys his microphone. Execute. The explosion is smaller than expected. 40 pounds of C4 creates a flash no brighter than lightning. The sound echoes through the canyon like distant thunder. For a moment, nothing happens. The fortress stands unchanged, impregnable, eternal. Then the mountain begins to move. The Keystone Point fails exactly as Clementine calculated. The natural arch loses its structural integrity. Geological forces that have balanced for millennia suddenly have no equilibrium. Balanced for millennia suddenly have no equilibrium. The fortress doesn't collapse. It simply ceases to exist in its current location. Concrete walls built to withstand artillery fire crumble like sandcastles as the limestone foundation shifts beneath them. The entire complex slides into the canyon with the inevitability of gravity. The enemy convoy arrives to find empty air where their fortress once stood. Supply caches buried under 1,000 tons of rubble. Communications equipment reduced to scattered fragments. Their impregnable stronghold has become a geological footnote. In the aftermath, silence settles over the desert like dust. The diversionary force ceases fire. The enemy patrols stand motionless. On their shattered ridge. 1 Woman's understanding of stone has accomplished what armies could not. Colonel Beauregard requests a formal commendation for Staff Sergeant Opal Clementine. The paperwork describes her actions in clinical terms. Reconnaissance, geological analysis, precision demolition, but the other soldiers know the truth. The quiet mechanic who fixed their engines also fixed their impossible problem. The fortress that could not fall has fallen. The supplies that could not be captured lie buried under a mountain that chose to collapse rather than serve tyranny. And somewhere in the motor pool, a woman with grease under her fingernails returns to fixing engines. Her secret revealed. Her mission complete. The desert keeps its own counsel. But the mountain remembers who listened to its ancient wisdom, who understood that sometimes the softest voice carries the hardest truth. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe. Sometimes, the most powerful explosions come from the quietest calculations.